Can't be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Grayson, a guy who has stress fractures in neither of his feet, I'm assuming, joins us here.
Yeah, not currently.
Not currently.
Yeah, I don't have any of that.
Good. Well, I'm glad, Grayson. So spring practice is underway. We had you here. You were here the other day, Tuesday, on the show talking about it. What are your early thoughts, especially after hearing Sean Bell talk about the quarterbacks yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much what we thought it would be, right? I mean, it's going to be a fairly open competition, but it does seem kind of like we thought. You know, Gary currently right now is the guy until either A, he's not the guy, or B, Blake Shapen just runs away with the job. That's at least how I took it. I took it as Gary needs to improve, but Gary's our guy right now, but we know how talented Blake Shapen is, and Shapen's going to have to go out there and earn it, which honestly, that's the way it should be. You know, Gary played well enough last year, I think, to go into the spring as, you know, the de facto starter. And I think that Blake Shapen played well enough for everyone to get very excited about his future and for him to at least have a shot in this competition, which I think he's going to get.
Yeah, Grayson, I wrote a little bit about this, but I think Dave Aranda really hammered home opportunity, in particular in regards to Shapen. I mean, he said the word like 3 or 4 times and even went into his own self-reflection this offseason about, you know, making sure you kind of validate guys and know that they want an opportunity and a fair shake. So they're certainly doing that. And for Blake Shapen, I thought it was notable that, you know, leadership was a big theme with him, from Sean Bell talking about it, you know, an institute that he went to work on that along with some other guys, to Blake himself talking about that. He seems like he's a different personality from Gary. So you think it's a matter of just being able to show that leadership, being maybe more of a quieter guy, whereas Gary's more of an outward type of a guy already?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I think that was a big separating factor during the spring, at the end of spring, and then going into the fall last year between Gary and Jacob Zeno and Blake Shapen. Was it just seemed like everyone talked about that leadership quality that Gary had. And it wasn't even just the talking part, you know, the vocal leader. It was also just the by example stuff. You know, he was the guy that was in there early, left late, put in the work. Everyone saw him develop through the spring to the fall just as a player, as a leader. And I think Gary got to that point last year where he really made it his team. And so I think Blake's going to have to really do some things to pass Gary in that regard. The good news is, based on how I see their relationship, based on that quarterback room, it seems like even if Gary didn't win the job, if Blake did win the job, Gary is still going to be a very vital leader for this team. So I think it's very important that both are there, that both are giving it their all, putting in the work. But I also think it's really important and healthy for the room that, you know, those guys really like each other. They want to push each other, and they each need to get better at certain areas of the quarterback position, whether it's leadership or on the field stuff. And I think it's important that they basically work on it together. I think that's massive for the program.
Do you think that some of the guys we saw not on the roster, that some of them were a surprise, some of them at least mildly, some of them maybe not as much as if you really think about it? Do you think that will affect Baylor, you know, searching in the transfer portal for positions like that, or are those, not to be flippant about it, were they kind of extra spots?
Yeah, they were kind of extra spots. Honestly, I got to the practice arena and we got the roster, and I immediately looked at Jack and I was like, all right, we need to look for these names immediately. And 4 of the 6 guys were guys that weren't on the roster anymore. So I think we kind of had a pretty good idea of maybe some of the guys that maybe weren't going to be there in the spring. And I think we're going to have more guys that probably leave, you know, heading into the summer after spring football, when guys kind of find out where they are in the program and where they are on the depth chart. So I think there will be more, and that will probably affect the transfer portal more. Whereas I think these were probably more so expected attrition.
Is it going to be hard for you to not be able to talk about Jackson Gleason eventually breaking out?
I think it's hard for everyone just because, you know, of his speed and just how appealing it was to just see him kind of fly down the field. I mean, his highlight tapes, I believe he's from the Mansfield area, but he was just a burner, guys, an absolute burner. You know, I will say, I think the guy that I talk about probably way too much is Jaylen Ellis. So he's probably the one that I'm a little more high on of the group. But I do think, a lot of people are still holding out hope that Jackson could be a deep threat, a burner in the offense. And it just never really happened. He wasn't able to create separation with his releases. He wasn't able to become a proficient route runner. And when those things don't all come together, it's just hard to make an impact, especially in this offense where those things are just so very important.
So, Grayson, another name that was no longer on the roster, Jonah White there at running back. But I thought it was very interesting, Dave Aranda, in talking about the running backs. I mean, we knew coming in there's no starter. I mean, there's very little experience even in that group, but there's a lot of potential. And one of the storylines last year was kind of like, where's Josh Fleeks? And, then when he stuck around, what's he going to do? And he's moved to running back, and Aranda had some pretty glowing comments about him, talking about him not just being a guy that can play running back, but even be the guy for them. That was his words. Your thoughts on Josh Fleeks and him being back at that running back spot?
Yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting to hear him talk about Fleeks like that, because I do, just based on what I've seen so far and just the body makeup of these running backs, Josh Fleeks was the last guy that I would have been able to sit here and say, yeah, that guy is going to take over for Abram Smith. I mean, his body type, you just don't look at him and go, oh yeah, that guy could be Abram Smith in this offense. But I don't know that anyone on this roster can be Abram. I think this is more telling of kind of where their situation is at running back. And I do think it's going to be probably even more of a committee than we thought. I mean, coming into the year, I think we were kind of like, okay, Tay McWilliams, he might be the guy, but we know there's going to be a second guy, kind of like Ebner and Smith. I think there's a chance in this offense that there might be 3 or 4 guys this year, just because you got young guys, you got Josh Fleeks moving into the running back room, you got Squirrel Williams, what's he going to do? Is he going to get touches? You got Jordan Jenkins, who's a young, promising guy, but is he going to be able to hold up during an entire season? Is Tay McWilliams the guy that we saw glimpses of last year, or was that kind of more fool's gold, and does he need to get more consistent as well? So it's very interesting, but I think my main takeaway is that there's going to be a lot of guys getting carries in the Baylor backfield this year.
Well, Grayson, it's kind of an interesting point you bring up about the committee, because it's not like any of these guys that are on the roster right now weren't here last year. And I know that Jordan Jenkins was a true freshman, but if they felt that any of the guys could have done what they did, and Tay McWilliams is certainly part of that, then Abram Smith might have still been a linebacker.
Yeah, and that's very true. I mean, but on the flip side of that, Paul, Abram Smith just had the most prolific season ever for a running back, yards-wise at Baylor. So, honestly, it might not have even been, these guys aren't going to be able to do it, and it might have been that just Abram was so good. You know what I mean? Like, it might have been one of those things where it's like, how do we keep this guy off the field? How do we not put him at running back when we're seeing, kind of what he can do? So I'm hoping it's more of that. I'm hoping that Abram was just so good that they were like, all right, we got to make this move, as opposed to, man, there's no one else that's good. We have to move Abram there. So I'm going to continue to believe that it was more just Abram was awesome, Ebner was awesome, and it caused them to not be able to play any of the younger guys.
You were out at practice earlier this week. Did you get much of a chance to really look at the wide receivers group? Dallas Baker takes over there for Chancey Stuckey, and some talent, but not a lot of proven just yet.
Yeah, guys, and I had a lot of notes kind of about this group, and just from seeing them, and Baylor's had some amazing wide receiving cores in the past. We know this. There have been some elite groups at Baylor. But I have not seen one as physically imposing as this group. And it actually starts with Dallas Baker, the coach, because Dallas Baker is a massive human being. That guy was way bigger than I guess I thought he would be. You can only look up Wikipedia and see, his height and weight. You don't really get a sense of it till you see him out on the field. He's massive. And then you look at his wide receiving room and you're like, okay, wait, that guy's 6'3", that guy's 6'4", that guy's 6'3", that guy's 6'3". It was like, one after another, you're looking at Elijah Bean, Javon Gibson, Hal Presley, Armani Winfield. It was just, the list went on and on of guys that you look at and you go, man, that guy is huge. What has he been doing this offseason? Looks like he grew an inch or two. Armani Winfield's already like 6'2", 6'3", 200 pounds as a freshman. That's really impressive by him, and they look really, really good. Now, obviously, that has to be put onto the field. But when I saw them, I was like, man, he's got a group that he's going to be able to mold. And I think they're going to find, 3 or 4 guys that are really, really good in that group. And I think they're going to be really exciting. The only I guess there were a couple other takeaways. Monterey Baldwin looks really quick. He looks like, he's maybe poised to ascend to a larger role. Gavin Holmes looked healthy. I saw him out there cutting a little bit. And obviously every time I see him cut, I get a little nervous just because, we know his track record. But it was nice to see him going out there and feeling confident. Jaylen Ellis was in the yellow, caution jersey. So I hope everything's okay with him. He was doing all the drills, but maybe just non-contact or something like that. So he's one that, they could really use to step up. Him and Gavin Holmes as older guys, veterans in that room, along with Seth Jones. Those guys, they really need those guys to be leaders on and off the field.
Grayson, anything popped up in the last couple of days that maybe you noticed or thought about that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, so I think one that's really apparent is kind of this flip-flopping situation at the Jack and the Will linebacker spot. And the reason why I say that is because I think coming into the year, everyone was kind of trying to figure out, okay, so is Matt Jones going to start at Jack? Then who's going to start at Will? And then is Garmin Randolph going to be a backup? What's going to happen there? Or is Matt Jones going to play the Will? And it seems like all signs are pointing to that Matt Jones is going to move back to the Will linebacker position, essentially a position he played a little bit in high school before moving to an edge rusher at Odessa Permian. So he has some experience there. He played there in the Oklahoma State game as well when Terrell Bernard was out. So I think he looks like he's going to be locked in there, which I love, guys. And it's not because he's shown a ton at that position. He definitely has made mistakes at that spot. But I think he can get better. But the bigger reason why I like it is because it allows Garmin Randolph to get on the field more. And Garmin is a guy that I had just very, very high hopes for when he was recruited. Just such an athletic body and such a unique body at 6'7", 270 pounds. Just gives them something unique at the edge position. And when you have a defensive line that has Gabe Hall, Jackson Player, TJ Franklin, Siaki Ika. This is a loaded group, but when you have a guy next to them like Garmin Randolph, I just think it can bring really, really special things to their pass rush. So I really like that mindset. I think Matt Jones will do just fine at the Will position. I think they'll probably have to mix up some schemes and coverages to allow him to really thrive there. But I just love this for both Matt and Garmin. I think it's a big storyline that maybe some people haven't seen a ton of yet. But as spring goes, I think you're going to see that those two are going to really have nice years this season.
Grayson, final thing for you. I read that LJ Cryer note at the start of the segment. Any thoughts on what he had to say?
Yeah, it's tough because he's just been dealing with this injury all year, and he was so good to start this year. So that's really tough to see. And obviously there's been all kinds of, speculation about, what's going to happen with a lot of guys on the roster, including LJ. And so it seems really optimistic to me. It seems like he's ready to get going, ready to be back, at Baylor next year and have a great year. And so I'm hoping that's what that means. I think he's a terrific player, a terrific ambassador for the Baylor program as well. So I wish him all the best. I hope he can get healthy because, man, he was so good to start the year. Just one of the best shooters I've seen at Baylor in a long time. Just such a confident shooter and a guy that Baylor could really, really use next year.
Grayson Gruenhaver, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, have a good weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
There you go. Spring football underway, and we'll hear from Sean Bell a little bit later. Just about 5 minutes from him yesterday, Craig, on what he expects from the quarterbacks and what he sees. And is that the last time I think we'll see Sean Bell until a year from now?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. If it's anything like last year with Aranda, then yeah, we'll get some springtime to talk to these guys, and that'll be about it. So, that's fine. I would prefer if, we got kind of like they do at UT or at Oklahoma or some of these other places where you get the coordinators as much as you get the head coach. They have them up there, for a weekly thing. But, hey, people run their programs differently. And, last year one of the big things was Aranda having one message and not having a bunch of mixed messages coming from different directions. And it worked out pretty well for them, in the year that they had. So I think, you looked at all the chaos of that first year and different ideas, different systems, too many differences with that group. The chemistry wasn't right. And they got that chemistry right last year. And Dave Aranda was the one voice, and so I don't see why they would deviate from that. But it is good to hear from the assistants. And, I think, with Sean Bell, I mean, clearly Blake Shapen and leadership is a big thing. And with Gary, it's just basically proving you're the guy. But yeah, that'll probably be the last time for a while.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk Villanova. Joe